Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm Kumar Gala. I'm the technical lead for the Light group. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we've been doing around microcontroller and device tree, both from how we're using it and some of the work that Erwin's been doing, trying to kind of improve code generation that we're using the device tree for. Then kind of talking about one of the other activities that we're doing in the group is around trusted firmware on the microcontroller side. So how we utilize and look at describing secure versus non-secure partitioning of resources with the device tree, what kind of tooling and configuration and problems that we're going to kind of run into. And then just kind of some miscellaneous issues that we've kind of came across this week or so forth, that hopefully just having people around to work on or talk about sort of that cross between what we're doing on the micro side. And then I put in here a reference to Rob's talk on Thursday and kind of about the JSON schema and kind of sort of a second half to this, and as we progress and as that progresses, how we sort of merge and meld. We've been using some bindings and some stuff a little differently in Zephyr, but we definitely want to move towards a common definition as that matures on the work that Rob and the guys have been doing. So I'll hand it off to Erwin here to start.
So hello, my name is Erwan Goyo, and I'm a light assignee from STMicroelectronics, working mostly on STM32 devices on Zephyr, and also on device tree solution introduction. Let me start to explain what we've been doing with device tree in Zephyr. So I will first show an example of instantiation code of a driver in Zephyr, so that you can see a little bit what is our problematic. So this is a typical code instance from a I2C driver. So basically, for each drivers, we'll have this kind of code for each instances. And since we are working on microcontrollers, we might have a lot of instances for each IP. Let's see what it's made of. So we have compile switches for the instance, which is important for Zephyr because we want to compile out everything which is not supported for a device. So we really need to have the minimum code embedded. So for one instance, we will have a configuration structure, a data structure. So configuration structure will be data that will be used for boot time configuration. Some data structure that will be used for runtime use, which is empty here. Then there are some functions for IRQ configurations, and then a macro for to instantiate the instance code in the software at boot time. So we can see that this makes a lot of config flags. So for this instance, there are around seven flags for 7 config flags for this instance, and so we will have then a lot of instances. So we can have up to 20 PWM, for instance, on a STM32. So this makes a lot of config stuff. So this is where device tree comes in. So this initial configuration system in Zephyr was based on kconfig, but soon we've seen that this can be quite complex to handle. There are a lot of config flags, and so aim of this instruction was to reduce this complexity and get some benefits from device tree. So initial introduction has been done in early 17 by Andy Ross. So there is, you can see his presentation that he made at ELC on February 17. So from the Zephyr community, there has been some discussions about why using device tree versus kconfig. So you can have that in mind. So what can be seen from Zephyr perspective? So kconfig has good points. It could be used in quite a lot of ways. So it can be used for configuration variables. It could be used for as a compile switches. It could be used for bit control, to say if a file should be used or not, and it could also be used in linker files. Also, it comes with a UI that is project configuration by the user. So issue it has no specification. Configuration is spread across a lot of multiple files and folders. It's hard to control duplicated information. There is no common vocabulary to enable the reuse across various arcs and SOCs. So in the other hand, device tree, which is made for hardware description and boot type configuration, comes with a specification that will help to describe hardware with a non-vocabulary or a grammar, which is then predictable and that make it easy to automate a decoding and then maybe produce some stuff out of that, which is not possible from kconfig. So it is well documented. Information is gathered in a limited set of known places, TTS files, wireless bindings, and information is factorized and with inheritance model. So what can be what people may complain sometimes is that it does not come with a UI for amending existing configuration. So how is that used in Zephyr today? So first it is used in pre-compilation. So this is the main difference with what other projects can do. So it is used in pre-compilation because we cannot afford in Zephyr to embed a device tree interpreter. So we have to, whatever we are doing with the information, it has to be done in pre-compilation. So what we are doing is that we are, today we are generating information for driver instance configurations. So we are generating set of defines. So from which we are getting the device instances base address, hierarchy number, hierarchy prior, for instance, or any useful information for boot time device instance configuration. To that, we rely on specific YAML binding files that we implemented for Zephyr. So each YAML file bound to a specific device thanks to compatible. And these bindings help to specify what piece of information from DTS should be interpreted and how it should be generated. So today it is fully functional on a wide range of devices. Simple devices like Serial, SPI, I2C, on bus topology also, for instance, sensor on I2C bus and so on. So for more complex IPs, it requires some additional work, for instance, clocks, PMUX, and external interrupts. So how does it work today? So we rely on DTC to provide out of the DTS and overlay and bindings files a monolithic file with symbols that are resolved. And from this compiled file, we are using a script, Python script, to get a Python dictionary, which is just a representation of the device tree in a Python format. Then comes the YAML files. There is one example here. in which we are describing, for instance, the properties of a node. We provide the compatible that is used for this node. And also we are able to provide some specific information. For instance, that should be generated as a define, that it is required or optional, if property is an array or a string and so on. And for instance, what type of device is it? For instance, here it's type UART. From the Python dictionary and the YAML file, we input this into another Python script, and from which we generate defines. So for a specific node, we'll generate a set of defines, which is made in this way. So we have first the compatible, then the address of the node, and then the properties. And to these defines, we affect the value extracted from a device tree. So we have this, but this cannot be used in the driver as is, because we have the address. So the driver need to be compatible to a range of stocks, and so the address may vary. So we need to have something more generic. So this is why we are providing as well a specific file, which is a fixed file, on which we associate the generated define to the config flag that we will use in the device. So with this information, we are able to use in the driver instance information that comes from device tree, is that we don't have to specify in kconfig system anymore. And then that helps to clean a lot of kconfig symbols in the kconfig definition files. So we are doing this define generation, but there are some other additional stuff which is done from device tree. So there is some specific use for flash partition, which is specific and well documented. So I provided the link to the documentation if you are interested. We also are using the chosen node to bind hardware instance with a software component, just like in Linux. So for instance, we'll be able to mention that the Zephyr console is using USART1. And it will generate a define that is generic and can be used in the code. Also, we are doing some heuristics with YAML. So we are able to establish a master-slave relationship on a bus. So for instance, if we have a BLE component on a SPI bus, we will be able to define, to generate a define which establish that the bus of this BLE component is the SPI3, for instance. So this is generating a quite complex define that might not be quite easy to use. So we also are using the alias so that we can associate a generic define to a particular node define. So by using the alias BT equals the p handle BT0, we are able to generate a define which is Zephyr generic, like BT bus name, to this quite long define, which was not quite generic and not easy to use. We are also using DT connectors, for instance, for the shields. This has some, so this is working properly, but it has some limitations. First, that we rely on fixed files that has to be populated manually and that are specific to each SOC. So this is one-time effort, but this is a bit painful to do. It does not, so it is this solution does not provide an easy handling of device instances, because still we have whatever work we are doing, we have to do it for each instance of a driver. So and this is redundant code, which is because we have always the same thing to do for each instance of a driver. Also, for some domains, it will require more than defines. For instance, Linux generation can hardly be handled by this kind of solution. Also, there is one issue which is not linked to this solution, but to the whole Zephyr building system, is that today we are processing kconfig before device tree. And this leads to an issue because we can have kconfig options that might be activated while the related hardware IP is not available on hardware. For instance, we can see in a menu config options related to SPI, while SPI is not present on the hardware, because at this point we have not treated the device information. And also, we have a lot of information on the board in device tree, but it is made available only to the pure C code, and then it cannot be used to additional system like CI or so on. Also, there is no tool available to ease the configuration by the user. So if so, we need to find one solution that can overcome these limitations. So if we come back to the driver instantiation code, and if we try to analyze how the code is made, we can see that basically you can split the code in three different three different blocks. So so I put that in color. So in black here we have the code which will be Zephyr generic. So for each driver, each IP, we basically have exactly the same structure. So we have a ifdef config for the instance. Then the config structure is a static construct. There you have ifdef for the interrupt. Then we have the static structure for the runtime data. There is the function for hierarchy configuration, which is always the same. And finally, the device init macro. And we'll find this structure for all the drivers, nearly. Then in blue, we have everything which is driver specific. So we have the name of the structures, name of the variables, name of the config flag, and that's also some specific flags for priority for the priority of the instantiation at the boot, and that's it. And finally, in red, we have all the information that can be taken directly from the device tree. So the base address, everything basically that we are generating today with the current solution. So idea was to find a solution to be able to generate this whole structure by using some script. So instead of generating only the config pieces, generate the whole struct for the instances. So there has been some discussions, and finally we converged toward a solution which is named CodeGen, which has been proposed by a member of the Zephyr community named Bobby Nolte. So this is a code generation Python library, which is derived from another Python library which is named Cog, and which was proposed initially by Ned Batchelor. I hope I spelled it correctly. And so what does this library is that it parses and executes Python snippets that are embedded in C file command sections. So in a C file, we'll have some commands, some command section in which we have some Python code available, and this code will be parsed by the library and executed at the time it is parsed. So if we are generating, we can make this Python snippet to generate some code and execute some specific instructions. So I explain later how this is working more in detail on how we are using it. But first, we have some feedback from the initial reviews. Is that so? There are two types of things. That first, we need to take care that introducing Python in C files, so this might frighten some users. And, so we have to take care of that. So we need to find a way to propose an API which is easy to use by non-Python aware users. So one way to do that is to provide an API as a CodeGel module. So I will come to that later. So there are some users that will be scared by Python, but in the other hand, that there will be users that will be quite excited to have a code generation solution, and we have to take care to limit that. So people don't come with a lot of code generated from this solution. We have to limit it to a certain point. So some rule has been established that can be resumed by these three sentences. So don't do anything with the preprocessors that can be done in C. Don't do anything with CodeGen that can be done with the preprocessor. And don't do anything with CMake that can be done with CodeGen. So this allows to set CodeGen at a certain point of the build system, so we can limit the abuses. And then, to ease the use of this solution, what was available today as information was not quite easy to use. So it requires the generation of one additional file that we call extended device tree database, which is basically a file, which is a JSON file, in which we input information that we extracted from the device tree, plus the YAML bindings. So we try to put this information together to have some coherent database that can be parsed easily by CodeGen. So if we come back to the generation process that I described earlier, we had the extract DTS include script that was generating defines. So at this point, we can generate this new database, DTS.json, that will hold the device tree information as well as the binding information, which we think that will be useful. For instance, we'll have for this SPI node, we'll have the compatible, the labels. So this information are taken from device tree, but also the device types, which comes from the YAML binding file. And then you can see that the information is put in a way that is easy to parse from Python. So, and then came the core element of CodeGen, which is the Python snippet. So this, you can see an example. So this is in a C comment part. So you can see here that so this device declare function, which is a function from the device declare module. So this will be the API that we provide to the users to call the generation from CodeGen. So if we take this as an example, we start, we inject some parameters in these functions. So the first parameter we provide is the compatible information. So this piece of code will be available in the I2C driver that we intend to implement for this particular compatible. So we start to mention the compatible so that CodeGen will then parse the DTS, look for this compatible, and treat the nodes that have only this compatible. Then we also inject as parameter all information which is specific to the driver, like the flags for kernel init priority, some function names, so the software IRQ function name, the IRQ flag interrupt, the name of the init function, the API name, and two additional variables, which are device data and device config, that are populated just before, so we can compile. And so these are the variables that will describe the two structures that are needed for each driver. So data, which is used at runtime, and config, which is used at boot time. And in this variable, we can assign the name of the variable and also the structure of this variable. So this is made as a form of a Python template, so in which we provide the structure that is used, the C structure, and we provide a way to access the DTS database that you can see in red here. So for instance, if we want to assign the base address, we'll provide with this semantic the path to the address in the DTS database. So we can provide the address, clock frequency, this kind of information which is coming from the device tree, but also some information that are coming from the YAML, like the device name. And then CodeGen will parse this information. It will generate, so it will parse, analyze, execute, take the information from device tree, and generate a driver, a C file, which is up, and it will generate the following code, which is hopefully what we want to for the instantiation code of the driver. So I took the same color code as we had earlier. So in black we have all the information which is Zephyr generic for a driver, like the ifdef static construct for the config function. We also have the IRQ function declaration, the macro that is used for device init. In blue, we have everything which is specific to the driver. So the name of the variables, the flags, the structure of the variables, and in red we have everything which is coming from the device tree, like the base address, the values, the bitrate, the name of the variables, the IRQ values, IRQ priorities, everything that we specified. So now with this solution we are able to instantiate, to generate the instantiation code for most of the drivers. So this is what we are able to do right now. But also, since we have introduced this EDTS database, we are able to generate any other information that could be useful within Zephyr build system and test system as well. So for instance, for sanity check on continuous integration, today we have YAML files in which we specify what is supported by a board. So for each board we have this YAML file in which we say, okay, we have SPI, UART, I2C, so that the SPI, UART and I2C test will be run on the board. But this is basically redundant information, and we can actually generate it from device 3 and from this database with either CodeGen or any other kind of script. So there are some points that are still open on this solution because this is not merged yet. So is that solution acceptable from users community? So is that acceptable to use these Python snippets? Is the API simple enough? Or maybe we can go a step further and try to adopt C-like macro API that could be preprocessor compatible. So preprocessor would accept it but do nothing with it. But that could be parsed by CodeGen. But this is a bit complex to find the good solution because inside the macros we should have code which is compatible with the Python syntax. So this has to be decided. Then what kind of file do we generate? Because today we are generating the whole file, so we are parsing the I2C STM32.c file, and we are generating it entirely, and with the instantiation code. So should we keep doing that, or should we generate only a specific file, like a header file, that would contain only the instantiation code? So this is also a point that has to be decided. And last, on the whole point of DT-based generation, we have also some points that has to be sorted. So we are saying that today we are running kconfig first. So ideal will, and this raises some issues. So ideally, we would need to first process the device tree so that we can inject the DTS metadata inside kconfig. So we will run DT generation first for the hardware configuration, and then control the generated code compilation with kconfig. And this will be the software configuration part. Then today we are generating config flags from device tree, and this can be confusing to the users because we have config flags, but they are not generated from, they are not coming from kconfig system, so it can be confusing. So idea is to introduce a DTS namespace, so it makes clear to the developers that a variable or anything is defined is coming from a device tree. And the other config will be clear that it came from kconfig. So this is one thing that would be ideal to do, but it has to be done and needs some work to make these flags visible to kconfig and specify how we can interact, because there will be interdependencies and so on, and this has to be sorted out. Then also we've seen that kconfig could be used for build control, but finally we have the perfect information coming from device tree, because we have the compatible, which is ideal to bind software on hardware. So idea would be to use DTS compatible flags to control the driver build. On the last point, that is requested by some people that are used to kconfig, that are used to kconfig, is that they would like to have the same kind of UI that exists today for kconfig, which is menu config, but for device tree. So this is one idea which has been raised. So maybe it will have to be made available. So that's it for this part. Yeah, maybe you have some questions.
Is there a need for kconfig still with these changes?
Yes, because for instance, with kconfig, we still have to control, for instance, which instances we want to have in the code. Because for instance, on hardware, we can have 5 I2C, and we might need in our project only 1. So we need to control which one is needed. So this can be made available by. This can be made also with device tree, but it would be good to keep it in kconfig as well. For instance, to control if we need to have the code for the interrupt. This has to be done with kconfig. So there are still some important information that have to be provided by kconfig. For instance, the kernel priority, these kind of things.
But there's no reason that this couldn't be also be provided by the
Well, an easy way that I kind of wrapped my head around it was DTS describes the hardware, while kconfig describes the application. And so when you make that separation, the DTS becomes a very complete definition of the hardware.
Yeah, so there's still some driver or software configuration that we still have in kconfig, right? So I can't think of a good example off the top of my head right now, but let's say you had an Ethernet driver and you, for whatever reason, wanted to have, I'm trying to think, like checksum offload as a feature that was software configurable or something. I'm not sure that's a great example, but so I'm trying to think of something that's a better software. Yeah, network stacks, right? So there's like what stacks we support, things of that nature are still. So there's still some need for kconfig for, I want to have a Zigbee stack or IPv4 versus IPv6 support or things of that nature. That's still software configuration of the system and total application.
Yeah, it just seems like it becomes a marginal benefit to not, because again, you could move that here. I know it's not device tree, but
So I think that the problem there is because device tree doesn't have any good configuration tools in the sense of, at least with kconfig we have menu config and GUIs around it and so forth, so it becomes a little easier for a user to configure versus hand writing a DTS today is not the most user-friendly means to spec config as well. So
yeah, but still, if you go this way, you're going to have 80% of the configuration in the device tree configuration and 20% in kconfig. So that speaks to working more on the tools for device tree.
absolutely. So I think that's, hopefully we'll get there, and then it'll be like, hey, there's only this much in kconfig, and so maybe we don't, And I think one of the things that kind of this work has shown, and to kind of talk about this week with the work Rob's been doing and so forth, is how, as we specify kind of the schemas more generally for bindings, how do we specify something that we haven't typically, I think, dealt with, which is parameters which are somewhat intended for the user to set, and then ones that are somewhat more static. So like regs or inner IRQ are pretty much, it's extremely rare that the user is going to change those. They're really defined by the SOC and so forth. And yeah, there's probably some rare cases that come up. But there may be something like in the Zephyr case, interrupt priority is a good case where that's something that the user and application may tune and you want to expose. So how do you kind of say, hey, these things are kind of read-only versus these are ones that are kind of read-write to the user and convey that as part of the schemas and bindings.
Yeah, it just seems to me that on the kernel there's a clear delineation, which is compile time versus runtime configuration, right, between kconfig. But here, they're both compile time configuration, so it seems like the overlap is just getting bigger between them. And
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you have hardware platforms that have lots of hardware on them, but the application is
right, but nothing impedes somebody from creating a different DT file that enables components, right?
Yeah.
That you need as opposed to what you have. And you can do that on Linux too, where you can say I have 4 I2C on my platform, but I'm only going to use 2, so I'm going to create a device tree that only uses 2 of them, right?
Right, and we'd still do that. I think the other aspect of the work we've been trying to do is we've been trying to sort of maintain, while we do it in the Zephyr context of there's a couple Zephyrisms that show up in a couple places with like some Zephyr chosen nodes and so forth. But what's there today, and I think the first goal is to get to the point where it is a hardware description that could then be used on any type of system, right? So if it's not Zephyr-specific software configuration, it's, yeah, we've gotten to a completeness with the hardware definition, so that then if you want to take that hardware definition and use it in, then I'll lead into kind of TFM and secure, you know, the TFM project, or if I want to use it in MicroPython as a database for that to know, you know, how the system or hardware is defined, you know, and generate code or do whatever I want to do with it. I at least have a platform software agnostic definition of the hardware that I can consistently use. So that's kind of been the first goal, is to really get there and get completeness. And obviously some of these code gen kind of issues have kind of come out of that. So. Any other questions?
On the last slide, you were talking about the DT being created before the kconfig. And with the overlay support that we added a while back, there's kind of a chicken and egg problem at that point.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a tough one. Basically what happens is that we use kconfig options to determine DTS snippets that are included in the DTS file before it's compiled. So yeah, that's a nice little loop on us. But aside from that, I mean, using the DTS namespace is a great idea. One other thing that I saw recently in one of the email threads on the lists was a fairly novel way to get rid of the fix-up files right now. And that's
using the alias, yes.
Yeah. So using the alias to basically blow away the fix-up files. So that would be definitely an easy thing to do today, just to get rid of those. It doesn't solve the rest of these generation issues that we have with the platform data, basically. But,
So just to comment that as of last week, DTC supports YAML output.
Okay.
So maybe you can get rid of one script, but that doesn't really seem like the main problem area for you.
Okay, yes, we'll have to look to that then. Yeah.
One caveat is that the format is basically undocumented and subject to change, because it is a format for validation purposes only at this point.
Okay.
But if you have any input on the format, that would be useful, because it could still change.
Okay, thanks.
So what are you using for generating the data to go into DTS from like SOC descriptions, and are you working on tools to import machine readable?
This is there is nothing to address that right now, so this will be up to the vendors or community people to address this point. So Right now, this is done manually, so at least from the people from the community. I think that maybe vendors have work on that internally, but there is nothing in Zephyr. This is not Zephyr specific issue actually.
I would guess that all the any generated stuff from SOC vendors are all specific to each SOC vendor, which is kind of a hard problem to work on in a common way. Maybe the flow should be the opposite, and SOC vendors should generate stuff from DTS. Use the mic.
I'm thinking of things like IP exact and SOC IP exact, where these things are described neutral format that are often used in the design flows that you could reflect on and generate this for. And I know IP exact has a lot of flavors and people use it differently, but yeah, to populate this manually is not going to be an easy thing to do. So just wondering what people are thinking in terms of how you would get started coming in with a family of IPs and SOCs to get this going.
Okay, thanks. Well, quickly, as I know our time's running short. Nice step in front of the projector. To pull up Andy up here with me. So one of the other areas that we're kind of looking at with Device Tree is as we start looking at TFM and Trust Zone on the microcontroller spaces. You know, how do we start describing that system configuration where we have, you know, a partitioning of resources between the secure and non-secure environment, and then kind of, you know, I know this shows up in virtualization, and you know, it's not unique to us, so that's kind of obviously trying to broaden the people that we're talking to about this. And you know, I know there's some work already with kind of the idea of a tag of secure, non-secure, and so forth, and what other kind of things we do, and then what type of tooling also around that we have from a validating that you're not conflicting, having conflicting resources maybe assigned to both secure and non-secure spaces, and then kind of code generation. So, Andy, I don't know, what else you want to touch on?
I think you covered it pretty well. Is that the issue that we have right now is that basically in systems you have two views into the address space. There's a secure and a non-secure, and depending on how you address them, you're still talking to the same IP block, you're just talking to it through a different address alias. And they have protection mechanisms in place such that if you are in one execution environment and you use the wrong address, you get a fault. So this has to be managed properly. And when you have two images on the system running, one in each execution environment, each one of them has to be using the correct view. And when you build this thing, it has to be a coherent view of the full system. Like Kumar said, you know, you can't have an overlap in usage of these things. So a non-secure execution environment can't access a device that was given to the secure environment because you'll get a fault. And when it faults, you're done on that side, unless you have some recovery mechanism. So when we start talking about, okay, well, how do we define these DTS files? I think the ranges is going to be the way that we're going to have to deal with this. That at least allows us to use one file to describe both, and then it's just a matter of getting the right view to get the output a proper output. But as far as the tooling and validation, you know, with whether you're going to run TFM on the secure side and Zephyr on the non-secure side, when you generate these images, you're going to have an output that tells you, okay, here's my device tree that I'm using on the non-secure side, and on the TFM side, we're going to have to do something similar that gives us an output that says, okay, here's what we have on the secure side, and we're going to have a tool that allows us to figure out if there's any overlap. And that'll save people a lot of problems. Instead of waiting to run it and having it fail and having a debug issue, they can catch it up front with the tooling. So that makes it a whole lot easier. You want to debug things. You want to debug the right problems. You don't want to run into the ones that you can get out of the way in the beginning. So that's where I think a lot of our efforts are going to be going down, at least in the short term, is to get the TFM generating a DTS and then doing this validation. So.
And then I guess the other kind of tool I was thinking about is that there's a lot of system initialization about what resources are in what protection domain and so forth that, you know, there's kind of the ARM way on V8M parts, and then there's vendor-specific ways on non-V8M parts.
Yeah, and it seems like ARM and other people are going to be using the same method now. So there's the address bit thing that they've been using. That's one way of doing it. It's like if one bit's set, you're in that address space, and if you're not, you're in the other. But there's also places where people have decided to lock down peripherals using like an access bit. So if that's set one way or the other, you can't access it. So yeah, I mean, using the DTS, we should be able to pull out a list of address spaces that we could then in turn use to configure the security. That is possible. Until we start like really using it and delving down into it, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. I know when I've looked at the amount of places that you have to get security configuration correct, it's almost equivalently to what you said about like making sure you haven't assigned something to both secure and non-secure, and that debug and so forth. That this is the next thing right after that, which is, did I get all the access controls in these 6 different places kind of gated correctly for what I was trying to do? So, yeah.
Yeah, because with the IDAUs and SDAU hardware that they use, I mean, that's how it's basically address ranges.
So are you aware of, we addressed some of this issue with ARM trusted firmware for peripheral partitioning with extending the status property, and that's documented in upstream in the bindings. And there's a couple different states, but it's assigned to secure world, assigned to non-secure. Those are the easy ones, and then there's some other cases where it was stranger use cases. Yeah,
and I think Qualcomm and some of these guys run into that, right? Because like the DMA engines and some other things like are controlled by TZ. Is that what this kind of came into, or was this something else?
We've done the binding. I haven't actually seen it be used.
Okay, well, I'll take a look at it.
Other than probably the more common use cases that ARM trusted firmware boots up and disables any peripherals that it owns, because that's the main and simpler use case.
Right. Yeah, and for TFM, that would be like if we decided to use a secure UART port, it would be the same thing. We wouldn't want anybody to be able to use that, so you would just lock it down. Yeah. Any other questions? Or in the back.
So is the intention here that there's one device tree configuration for both TFM and Zephyr, or 2 device tree configurations?
Ideally, one that we use in both places, because they're 2 separate repositories, right? And we run into the same problem with Linux to some extent. I mean, you may have multiple places where you're using the same DTS file. It's just, but when you create the image, you're going to be using whatever DTS you have.
You kind of have 3.
3?
You kind of have 3, right? So you'd have the hardware itself, right, that has both secure, non-secure, everything kind of raw that you wouldn't normally ever use, but it's the baseline that you inherit from, right? And then you would have sort of the 2 real ones, which is the secure and non-secure. So from if you think about it from the number of DTBs you'd probably have 2.
So I would say it depends on the hardware, because
Sure.
what I'm not familiar with M-class stuff as much, but on the A-class, you could have a completely different view of the hardware in secure versus non-secure, and the DT is the CPU's view of the hardware. And if that's different, then maybe you need completely different
When you
sources.
say different, is that because TZ is you're treating services as virtual devices, or is there something else going on there?
No, the architecture allows pretty much anything. You could have your memory at different addresses. The peripheral memory map could be completely different. I mean, generally,
Devices that run on one side.
or yeah, devices on one side or the other. It's all allowed. Most of the time, is the same view, and you could get away with just one representation.
I guess, I'm not sure I see the difference, and we can take it offline, as to, it seems like you'd still have what the hardware itself has, right? So it has these peripherals that may be only meant for TZ, or there's a peripheral that's only meant for the application or the OS, but the hardware has both at some address range, or is there stuff where the things are like aliased at the same address and it's two different things?
It could be anything.
Okay.
It could be two different things at the same address, depending on which world you're in.
Yeah, so
Because secure versus non-secure is essentially
another address bit, yeah.
And
Well, more mundanely, these are two completely different built environments, right? This is like a compile time tool, so where would the master be if you had a single file?
I think these are problems we still have to solve. Okay, well, I'll skip the last slide. Just there was some miscellaneous things that we'll probably hack on this week and talk to people about. So thanks, everybody, and that's it.